Well, welcome everybody to the March online program for the alumni of the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in sunny Powell River, British Columbia. Anyway, this month, we've been, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, but a lot of the alumni have been asking about what basically boils down to the biology involved in addiction. And the questions that I've been getting are implying that addiction is mainly biology and maybe a little bit something else, but mainly biology. So a lot of the questions, as I mentioned on the written portion, something like, if I eat sugar while I'm in recovery, am I still in active addiction? Because sugar, if you remember from Drugs in the Brain, is a mood-altering substance. Or if is it possible, like a crack baby, to be born addicted? You know, that kind of thing, right? So which is, all of these questions are basically on the biology of addiction. And since it's one of my favorite topics anyways, yeah, I thought we'd just spend 4 weeks and I'll give you some information. And as usual, you are the author of your life, so I'm just going to present the information to you and then you can make your decision. Because the decision will be important for you. If you believe, for example, that addiction is a disease, okay, you remember that the disease model says that if you add this substance that people like you and I call drugs into your brain, then the drugs hijack the brain, right? Creating your powerlessness and this disease. So it's fundamentally a biological issue. Okay, so if you believe that, the first thing you also have to believe is there is no cure. So you're going to be stuck with this for the rest of your life, right? And you know that because the problem is this substance interacting in your brain, that basically if you go out and get drunk, you know, then you're going to be powerless again, and that's it. Now, if you don't believe it's a disease, you're still going to have to struggle with a lot of the biology, right? Everything you learned in Drugs in the Brain. But you might get it in your mind, well, maybe the problem isn't the substance. Maybe the problem is the way I'm living my life, right? Or as Alcoholics Anonymous says, you know, am I being true to myself? To thine own self be true, what they put on that ship, right? And so you'll have a different approach probably to recovery, right? If you believe in the disease model, you better come to terms with the fact that you will be in recovery for the rest of your life, right? And that you are one drink, one drug away from active addiction again. If you don't believe in the disease model, then things will change for you, right? You don't actually have to confront this belief that, oh my God, if I have like one beer, that's it, I'm doomed. And if I go to the dentist and get a root canal, boy, I better not take any Tylenol 3. You know, that kind of thing, right? Anyway, I'll present the information to you, and then you can make your decision. So this week, we'll talk about what's probably the most famous program associated with the disease model, and that's the 12-step program. Although, interestingly enough, in this book, this is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, as far as I can figure out, they only use the word disease like once, and that's calling it a spiritual disease. Otherwise, they call it an illness, and in one place I think I read it was a malady. But anyway, illness is the word they mostly use in this book. And yeah, it's interesting, and it's very clear that they consider this an illness. Now, it's a really interesting illness because it also says in this book, as I mentioned on the online, the written portion, that only a spiritual experience can conquer it. So it's kind of a weird illness. But they did ask Dr. Silkworth, you know, to write a chapter on here. Dr. Silkworth was one of several medical doctors who was convinced there was a biological basis. Right, and he did some research at Towns Hospital, which is where Bill Wilson ended up, right? So Bill Wilson knew Silkworth, but there were other medical doctors running around saying the same thing. But Bill Wilson knew from his own experience that, well, you know from your own experience, right? You just watch someone drinking who's not an alcoholic and someone drinking who's an alcoholic, and it's pretty obvious there's a difference. And if you remember some of the workshops we talked to you about you discover that there were people who went off and became addicts, and they talked about what the experience of the drug was like. And the addicts would routinely say things like, "Oh, yes, finally, this is the way I was meant to feel." Or through the drug, they could feel a freedom to be themselves. A non-addict, non-alcoholic is opposite to that, right? They will tell you routinely that, "Oh, I felt unnatural," or "I knew this wasn't normal," right? And Bill Wilson knew all that because he had met hundreds of alcoholics. So he understood that to perfection. And he personally believed there was a biological basis to this. And people like William Silkworth confirmed that for him. But this book, of course, was written in 1939, right? So you can imagine the state of medicine 70 years ago. Probably wasn't all that good. And William Silkworth was just, I mean, he actually called it an allergy, right? So not really great science back then. Anyway, in this book, the use of the term disease is quite interesting. It's not a technical description, obviously, because Bill Wilson never took a medical course in his life. So he's using it as a metaphor in this term of dis-ease, right? Because this is what Bill knew. He knew that alcoholics felt uneasy in the world without the drug. Or as that, I remember that great Nobel Prize winning addict, Eugene O'Neill, said, I knew early in life that living frightened me when I was sober. Right, that concept. And Bill Wilson understood all that, right? And so he uses the term disease, not really in its technical sense, but more in the sense of, look, alcoholics are uneasy in the life. And I'm going to trust Dr. Silkworth and all these doctors who tell me there is some sort of biological basis to it, even if, he didn't understand it, and maybe he understood the medical doctors were in the just beginning to appreciate the biological basis. So this book, which has become famous for the disease model for some reason, when you read the word disease in this book, I mean, keep in mind, this is 1939. Bill Wilson knew nothing about diseases, right? And so he's using it just to suggest there's a biological basis, but more for the idea that alcoholics they aren't themselves, right? They're not true to themselves. And this is one of their big struggles in life. So the disease model, if you believe it's an illness or a disease and you use Alcoholics Anonymous to back that up, just remember, Bill probably wasn't all that interested in the biology. Like he was, it says very clearly in this book that alcoholism is a spiritual condition that demands a spiritual solution, right? So keep that in the back of your mind. At any rate, as I mentioned on the online program, it's actually one of the fascinating things historically on how on earth AA ever got associated with the disease model. But who knows? One of those weird things. At any rate, I'll see you next week with a new topic.